Theo, as you preached this sermon, what was particularly encouraging to you?
I like seeing that like David makes mistakes and can recover from it, and it's an encouragement to me to know that.
Yep. Sure.
It's a good reminder of the importance of humility and leadership and not getting ahead of ourselves. Thanks.
Yeah, in line with that, that's God's word. This is just one of countless examples of Him trying to humble us, and I need that.
Me too.
Yeah, thanks Theo, and just definitely challenging, remembering like honestly the true test of humility is our whether acceptance of God's word is submission to it.
Yeah, you encouraged us through a negative example to be good leaders, told us how and what we should do even when we mess up. That was both challenging and encouraging things.
Yeah, mine was similar. Just this idea that like I was just reminded that the God that we serve is pretty big, and that's real important and real good news. So, especially as leaders. What's something that you thought you maybe missed on? Maybe you went for it and like, I don't know, I don't think I did very well.
There was like a point at the end I wanted to make with David's like recovery at the end. It needed to be fleshed out a little bit more, I think, and so that's something.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Trev, what could have been improved?
Yeah, ditto on that. I thought the conclusion, the wrap up, needs a little bit of work there. I don't know all exactly how, but maybe come back to the text, maybe a bit of review of what's been learned, and yeah, just something more there to make it more rounded.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
As it relates to your main point, as we're thinking about Ryle's thing this morning, I don't think it was a simple sentence, just in its formulation.
Right.
I don't think it was simple words, though I obviously understand.
Yeah.
I just think it could have been even simpler.
Yeah.
And then you hit it at the end, like verbatim, but I didn't get hints, and maybe it was because of like the slightly more challenging nature of the words, but I didn't get hints that you were coming back to it throughout.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a few points that you're going pretty fast.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was a lot of hard thing for me to like process and then write down. So yeah, just kind of slow it down a little bit.
I noticed that you had your hand in the pocket the entire time.
Oh, really?
I think I don't know if saw you took it out once.
I took it out like a couple times, but it was probably in there.
Okay, so I mean, if you're behind a big pulpit, nobody's gonna really notice that, but just
You're not using it at least.
Yeah.
Even if you're behind a pulpit.
Be wary about where your hands are and what they're doing.
That's fair.
So I agree with you at the end part, and you were reading a lot at the end.
Yeah.
And I think that like what your content was really good, but like when you were reading about the Jesus stuff, you were trying to be precise, which is good, but it was clear that like you hadn't fleshed it out a lot. Not because it was really confusing, it just wasn't like in you. And so it felt like the gospel connection part was like this complex piece that you were having to work through. And that part didn't really like, because when I was like, ooh, if you were looking at us and saying these things, then it would have been, because you had like some dope runs and stuff in there, we'll get to that in a minute. But like, it just was like, it felt like at that part you switched into presentation mode.
Okay.
Like, I'm really trying to hold on here, and we're trying to hold
Yeah.
on with you as you're trying to present.
Yeah. I think to that point, like when the clock hits like 10 minutes, I get real scared. And then I kind of freak out a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
You.
I think there's a smaller thing, Theo, but it felt after the gospel connection, you did an application, which I think was good, but to me the tone felt a little bit like scolding or reprimanding, and somehow there's like a line between, like, you want to be serious with it, but you don't want to feel like, or make it feel like it comes across too harsh, unless that's what the text did.
Okay.
But,
yeah.
that's kind of how I thought about it.
This could be just a functional thing, but do you view your prayer before the reading of the text in the lab as like part of the sermon, or is that just
No.
like you? Okay.
No. But yeah, I mean, you can make a comment on it. It's,
No,
yeah.
I guess it was just sort of like kind of set up what you were about to talk about, so I had hints, and then it was like, I didn't know if that was characteristic of like how you do it at your church. We've talked at times in here in the past about just like praying intentionally, which I'm not saying you weren't, but like don't be hinting necessarily at the content of your sermon explicitly. Like you said something along the lines like, we're about to see, Lord, like, so I know it wasn't part of it. I was just curious if you viewed it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought you did some good context with Saul, as you're contrasting Saul and David. But then as you hit David, I feel like you could have done a little bit more context there, because you talk about that he was guilty from last chapter.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't read last chapter.
Okay.
The previous chapter.
Okay,
in the,
that's
in this
fair.
moment. So it's just
Yeah.
like, okay, like what happened last chapter?
Yeah, that's fair. Okay.
Did you tie your gospel connection to an exact text?
So like the Philippians 2, I did do that, and then like I kind of tried some stuff with this. A lot of this was based less on like a tight theological connection, more on like allusions and images that are similar, and that kind of Philippians 2 kind of sparked.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I just didn't hear it. That was my. I mean, I thought.
Listen up, Nathan.
Sorry, you can't hear everything. But yeah, I guess then my only other thing was, I guess the structure titles, although kind of cool because a lot of the same words or variations of them are being used, I was still kind of confused about why those were those.
Okay.
And
I
how
also
they
missed
helped.
them. Yeah, I'm gonna say that I missed them altogether because I was writing down your main point.
How it helped you is really the question.
Yeah, so you were super quick out of the gate. This gets back to Wes's first comment. So like, I don't know what your title is. I looked at your paper, but like, even taking that and then taking the parts of the main point, which you, even though you repeated, because they're kind of, it's not the easiest thing to get your hands around, and your homiletical points didn't help me understand that, I was kind of like, wait, oh dang, like I don't know anything about what's going on here.
Okay.
And your opening illustration was so great, but you ripped right through it. And it was like, oh shoot, like just sit there for a second. And so, and I understand, because preaching against the clock is very challenging.
Yeah.
But like, this sermon didn't need more information. It needed 7 more minutes of time to just be sitting on things.
Okay.
So I think it was exactly the right amount of words, right amount of content for 25 minutes.
Okay.
But just kind of helping that thing settle in. And then you making those, if you're going to have a title and homiletical points and all that kind of stuff, which I think you should, it's going to help us, it should help us work our way towards the main point.
Okay.
So like even something, because like you did this great thing with you did a play on, what was it? If everyone looks evil, maybe you're the bad guy.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great, but set up that line.
Okay.
So set it up by going, just like at the beginning, right? If everybody stinks, in that same way, now you set it up in that analogy thing, then nail us with that thing, and it would land 1,000 times harder.
Yeah.
Because what we laughed at the beginning helps us laugh. That's the shield going down, and you come out and use that same verbiage. Maybe you're the one that's evil, and you just stab everybody.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I'm going to write that down.
So, what did you think you did? You're like making progress on.
I really like the sermon. I like the details I picked to make my argument, and I don't know. It was fun preaching narrative. So
yeah, bud.
Yeah, so
They're the best.
I enjoyed it too, Theo, overall, and I liked how there were some times in the beginning where you said, this doesn't say too much about this because the narrator wants us to focus on this, and that was, it just reminded me of mine yesterday and what I didn't do, and you helpfully kind of like drew out why the narrator focuses on certain things. I appreciated that.
You, in a very refreshing way, you were sort of constantly calling us back to the text. And at times I was like, you might be reading a little much, but it was refreshing because you were excited about it, and you just, it was a very, every sermon should be this way, but like it was a text-heavy sermon. But not in like a heady way. Just to look at this.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was great.
I tried to pick the text that I read was like more dialogue than anything else.
It wasn't all the time that I felt like it was too much. And like I said, even at those couple moments, I was like, it's good.
I thought exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
But so the way you combated that, because if you wouldn't have done it the way you did it, it would have been too much reading.
Yeah, exactly.
But because you were reading, you either set up the reading or you read it interestingly and then went into explaining it. It was like, oh, okay, cool. Because you're essentially retelling the story.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah, I think that's connected to what I thought you did well was helping us picture the story. Because you weren't just like reading it again.
Yep.
You would pick out these different parts to highlight and even, did a little imagining thing, but not in like an unhealthy way. You're talking about like picturing Saul in this high place tapping his spear and what he did with his spears previously. You're just helping us like picture the story and get into it.
And I think the flow of your sermon and also how you kind of weaved in and out of the text to us was just super fluid. Like you'd come in, get engaged with the story, and then you'd like pull like a idea from that, and like we might not even connect it totally, but we would connect it pretty easily. So I think you handled moving from the story to us pretty well too.
Yeah. So your best moment of doing that was this playful obedience with Saul's speech, right? You didn't make us feel like idiots or that like you're some kind of Hebrew genius. You're just like, look, man, it's just like this one long rambling sentence that spills its way out, and you're like, okay, that's an interesting observation. And if it would have just been there, it would have been like, oh, okay, so what? But then you immediately turn and you're like, we've all heard this speech. Right. And I'm like, okay, you start with the kid, you're like, you stupid kids. Dad, and you're like, those dumb dads, annoying pastoral counseling is like pastors, and you're like, oh boy. But that was great because you were circling the wagons to kind of land right on your audience, but because you built it up, it landed a lot harder. Leave that if everyone looks evil. Maybe you're the bad guy, without telling us that we might be the bad guy. That's the natural
slanting. What do you call it?
Telling it slant, right? You didn't have to say it. We all knew what you were saying, and it didn't feel like you were kind of like, ha-ha. It was like, oh man, I guess you're right. So that was beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, I enjoyed that part too, and then at the end you said this isn't even the main point, and it just kind of like hooked me into what you were gonna say next because it was just building up on something. And so I appreciate kind of what Nathan was saying too, just your weaving in of the narrative to real life today.
That's hard, so that's why I mentioned it.
And it looked like you were enjoying it, like it was.
Yeah.
So it was nice.
Again, on sort of a granular level, your explanation of Doeg was, I thought, fantastic. who is Doeg, he just drops in here, and like how it serves as a cap of Saul's thinking everyone's turned against him was that's just really helpful. Like I wasn't anywhere near the ballpark about what Doeg was doing in this text until you explained it, and I was like, oh, cool.
Cool. Sweet. Thanks.
Yeah, I like how just at the end you kind of flipped your main point in the positive sense. So, I mean, you were arguing toward, and so humble, adherence to God's word, brings its acceptance and stuff. So I felt like that was good, like a way to end it.
Right.
Yeah, and I feel like even as we just talked about this, you took the principles and applied it to us really, really well. With that application, especially at the end, you just took kind of like, this is what everything I've been saying throughout it all. This is what it matters for us, and you gave a lot of good stuff there at the end. So, and it was unbelievable because you argued to it.
Yeah. So you did a good job by pointing out, without like completely trashing him, but like David's not that different than Saul at this point in time. Right, it's very clear that like you think that's true of this story, and then you were like, "There's only one difference."
Yep. Oh.
So then that highlight, even the timing of it, like, so now I'm perked up. Like, okay, so what's that difference? That difference must be very important.
Mm-hmm.
And so he followed God's word, and I agree with you. Like, to make the an edit on his sermon is to then go to that end and be like highlight the irony of David. Like, stick with me. Right, and just like the audacity of that statement, what he's saying is one who trusts in God's word. And you had mentioned like Abby After's gonna be with him all the way to the end, and be like, and everyone would have known this. Like this plays out. So that like general kind of hint that you had, flesh that one little part out, because that and show how it is reinforcing the idea of David's trusting in God's word. And that was like a solid point because it made the point about God's word, which is what you were trying to emphasize the whole time, by setting up the comparison in like a lot of different ways, except for this one little detail. It's like, oh, okay. It's a great way of highlighting that.
Yeah.